Okay, the meeting will come to order. Ms. Gore, will you call the roll?
Mr. Benjamin?
Present.
Ms. Conley?
Present.
Ms. Williams?
Present.
Mr. Lamar?
Present.
Dr. Diop?
Present.
I'm going to ask Ms. Conley if you will lead us in the pledge to the flag, and if you will remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Gore, do we have any citizens' comments? All right, thank you, Ms. Gore. Is there a motion to approve the June 28, 2022 agenda?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Benjamin and seconded by Dr. Viox. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Before we do,
Sure.
I'd like to just talk about
Sure.
9G and H and I. In light of the elections coming up, should we wait on electing new officers? Since, I mean, there could be a completely new board within a month.
Well, policy says we do elections in June. Ms. Speakman, I'll let you speak to that.
Yes, ma'am. That is, oh, do I need to go? Sorry. That is what the current policy provides, so if you wanted to change that, you also have a provision in your policy manual that allows you to suspend any policy rule that you have. So, but to do that, you would have to have a majority vote to be able to suspend the rules to make that change.
Okay.
All right, let's see, we were at any discussion, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion's carried. Reports, I have no chairman's report tonight, and we'll go on to the superintendent's report.
And I barely have a report tonight. I've been communicating with you guys over the past few weeks about anything that I felt was relevant or urgent that we felt like we needed to discuss or that you need to be made aware of. So I'm trying to reserve the time tonight because we've got several presentations about agenda items that are going to be before you tonight. I do want to give a shout out to our CO teams, Mr. Goforth, his team, Ms. Douglas, and really all the academic and accountability individuals who've developed and led our summer programs, summer school. All of that's scheduled to end this week, and it's been going on now a month, and so it's going to end this week. So they've done a really great job with that. A lot of positive feedback. You know, the parents don't want it to end, but you know, we want our employees to have a little bit of a break before they have to come back in late July, early August. So great job on that. There's also a sheet that looks like this in your stack of information. This is a draft in-service overview so that you can start looking at that to see where you want to, what events you would like to attend. The main one, obviously, is the July 28th, the district-wide kickoff in service, but there's other things going on, as you can see, throughout. So that's a draft. I think it's pretty settled, but it's still sort of somewhat in draft form as we're continuing to tweak and make changes on that. Ms. Douglas's team is the department responsible for that. So with that, I'm going to move into departmental reports. Dr. Clark with Human Resources, you have a report.
Good evening. I just want to give you an update on the number of employees that we have hired and staffed so far. Last year, to give you a comparison, last year we hired 33 certificated and classified employees. To date, already we've hired 30. We were all staffed until last Friday, and we had 2 resignations come in. One over the weekend is a teaching position at Arlington High School, and then one today is an elementary teacher at Arlington Elementary School. So all that we have left are those 2 positions filled, and then we have a classified position to fill, one at AES and one at AHS. DES is fully staffed, and as well as Arlington Middle School. And then yesterday, we had an onboarding session. Our next one will be July the 20th, and we processed 15 of those employees yesterday. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Ms. Douglas, accountability?
No report.
Okay. Mr. Ruff, operations?
Good evening, Board. I want to give you a quick update as to our summer projects. HVAC at the high school is our biggest project. It is progressing, but it is not complete. We're still receiving equipment as we speak. As of July 1, we will begin the STEM lab renovation at the middle school, and also the outdoor classroom, which all of you saw the presentation for. We'll begin that as of July 1. Also, by the time we meet again in August, we should have some plans and renderings for the new Fine Arts Edition that we can begin construction on once you guys approve that at the next meeting. So thank you. Any other questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Mr. Hill, communications. Mr. Hill will be up again later when we get to the strategic plan item.
Good evening.
Hello.
Before moving on to the strategic plan later, I first wanted to show you our new website redesign. You may remember earlier this school year, I talked to you about how we were going through that redesign process. And so just to kind of give you an overview, I oversee all the district websites for the district and the schools, but then we also have a webmaster at each school, which are our instructional technology facilitators. So each school has a webmaster at the local level. So we've been working since November through the design process, carrying over content, but we really rebuilt the website from the ground up. We really had 3 things that we wanted to tackle with this website. The first being the back-end user experience, because our webmasters are teachers. They did not go to college to become web designers. So we needed to make sure that we found a system and a product that was easy for them to update, because that is not their full-time job. So that was our number 1 goal, and we got that through Blackboard. Our second, goal was to really simplify the menu structure for our parents. On our old website, even though it was a progression from the previous website, that's what you hope, it gets better every time, our menu structure was still kind of hard to navigate for parents. You didn't really necessarily know where to go sometimes. So we really wanted to simplify that structure. We think we got it with that as well. And then finally, 3 is just a website redesign, right? Making it more modern to fit 2022 compared to our last website, which launched in 2018. So I'm going to show you this real quick, just a quick little demo, just in case you have not seen it yet, and just run you through that kind of menu structure that I talked about. So let me move it over. Well, maybe not. Okay, so when you log onto our website, this is the interface for the user. Obviously, a modern refresh. You got the big picture. You're able to really highlight the great things that are going on in our district. So you'll see on the kind of rotating image screen, we're highlighting how many scholarship opportunities our students brought in the class of 2022, voted the #1 top workplace in Memphis Metro, best communities for music education. So just a good way to highlight the awesome things that are going on in our district. But what I really want to point out is that menu structure that I talked about, because this is what you'll want to know when you go to our website. But I can't from here see my cursor. So let me try again. Russell, I might need you.
We all need Russell.
I think so. So I should have just mirrored it. But okay. There we go. Thanks, Russell. Okay, so the menu structure. So like I said, we really simplified it. So now you'll see here at the top, you'll see our district, future students. Oh, here we go.
Alert.
And it's on
That's why
silence.
I turned that off on my phone.
It's on silence. How do you?
No, you have to turn the alert thing off because if it wakes me up at night, I can't go back to sleep. Yeah, Russell.
Yeah, another Russell thing to show
Do a
us later.
session in that before we leave.
Sure, I know how.
All right,
That's what we
so let me start over again. So you'll see at the top where our menu structure is. So we really simplified it. So when you hover over it, you're basically forcing the user into one of these things. Either our district, future students, so whether you're a potential student that wants to come to our district, current students and parents, employees, and then of course future career. So let me just show you our district. So when you go here, a lot of times people wonder, well, where are you? Are you Arlington, Virginia? Are you Arlington, Texas? Or Arlington, Tennessee? So just kind of get this nice picture about where our district is. Of course, our mission and vision, we start with that. But here's an example of how we really simplify things. So on the last menu, when you hovered over our district, board policies, board agendas, they lived in several different places. So now it just naturally makes sense for everything school board related to be housed under our board. So you'll see obviously the bios from our board commissioners, but also important board resources. So board policies, agendas, and minutes, our schedule for the 22-23 school year. So everything that is related to our school board lives on this webpage. So you'll already see from that how simplified that is. So if you go back to our district, you'll obviously see other kind of highlights as well. And I'm not going to dig you through all that. On future students, again, we're talking about future students. Those that are looking either to move into Arlington or they're not quite an ACS student yet. And so we really just walk them about who we are. We show our nice recruitment video that really kind of showcases all of our schools, campus life, kind of introduces them to all of our campuses, and then obviously live, work, and play, because if we're attracting new families, we want to show them not only what's happening in Arlington, but also what's happening in the greater Memphis and Shelby County area. So it's really kind of a one-stop shop for our future families as well to learn about our district, but also the region in which we live. Current students and parents, they don't necessarily need all that kind of fluffy information, right? Because they already live here. What they're looking for is for that information at their fingertips. And so with current students and parents, we really simplified the menu structure. So once you come here, it's more of those quick, fast links. So we made sure to separate it into things like academic support, ACS technology, calendars, enrolling your child. So really those kind of top highlight features that parents are always looking for: sports and rec, meals and fees, that sort of thing. Employees, obviously we're going to be talking about employee benefits, but also how to get into your employee portal, flex learning, calendars, Power School, and all the different things employees need. And then of course our already established careers page, which is a way for us to help recruit teachers and staff members who are interested in Arlington Community Schools. So again, this website launched last week, and so we're really happy about it, and we'll obviously be making tweaks as we go, but we hope it makes it a little more simple for you guys as well. Any questions?
I looked at it today. I was very impressed. Really
Awesome.
good.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
the only thing that I would say that I would ask, just from the past couple of days, some social media interactions that I've been immersed in the middle of, that if we have some differing policies on two different sites, could we kind of marry those up to where they say the same thing? I'll talk to you about that.
Oh, yes.
Specifically, you probably saw
Yes.
it, but happy to talk to you about that offline.
Yes.
Which ones I'm talking about.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's another good thing about redesigning websites, because the thing that you're actually talking about was carried over from the high school website from 2014. So it just kept getting carried over. And because we simplified that menu, it actually rose to the forefront. People actually saw something that was created back in 2014. So we have been able to rectify that issue. But I'm actually glad you asked about school board policies, because I do want to show you this. Another important thing about website redesign in 2022 is accessibility. Thinking about people with disabilities, whether if they're blind, they're deaf, you have to make sure that your websites are accessible. So one thing that we did, and I want to thank Ms. Speakman and Ms. Glenda Haskins, with board policies, those were all PDF documents prior to this website. PDF documents are not accessible for those with disabilities. It can't be read to them many times if you're blind, and it also can't be transcribed for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so with these board policies now, you'll see that it's no longer just a PDF. PDFs will still be available through our general counsel's office if that's what you want. But for the public facing, it's actually all text-based board policies now. So this will actually be read to someone who, for example, is blind. And so now that is all accessible, which is another huge advancement for this website in particular. So,
It's good.
Great.
Very nice. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I want to thank Mr. Hill publicly for the work, the hours that has gone into this project. Hours upon hours has gone into this. Meeting with our I don't even know what their new name is. Y'all
ITS.
changed it. Facilitators.
Facility.
Technology facilitators in each school. They've met for days at a time trying to get this ready, so it's a lot of work. But I think it's going to be something that's the best that we've ever had at this
Great.
point. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ms. Speakman and Mr. Goforth. I think they're going to tag team, and they've got a couple of presentations they're going to make about some upcoming legal things that have curriculum implications. So they've been working together on this, and so we thought this was a good time for you all to be. You've heard about it. I know you've heard about it, but there's some information that we feel after Ms. Speakman has dug deeper into it that will help us all to better understand where this new retention law is going to take us.
Yeah. So I know you guys have, as late as Friday, gone to seminars about, about this retention law and about a lot of other things. And I hope you'll indulge me here to spend any of your time, but you remember during the last 4 or 5 meetings I've said I didn't have a report, so I didn't take up your time then. So I'm just asking for just a tiny bit of time here. So on this first one having to do with 3rd grade retention, Mr. Goforth and I have worked a lot with each other, and then also with teachers, also with his staff, also with other people in his same capacity in other districts, other municipal districts. So we think we've come up with some really good ways to deal with these laws. But what I would ask you to do is, I know in those seminars and like the TSBA ones, they're just kind of, regurgitating what the law is. But just for a moment, if you would put yourselves in the place of a parent. So if, as I'm going through this, think to yourself, okay, I'm a parent of a child who's going to be retained, et cetera, et cetera. And so then at the end of it, if you have any questions from that perspective so that you can answer questions of your constituents, I think that might, go a long way with, people in the community who have questions, because I know they come to you guys first. So first of all, each school district annually has to administer a universal reading screener to each student in grades K through 3 during each of the 3 window periods. Immediately upon determining that a student in grades K through 3 has a significant reading deficiency based on, again, that universal reading screener, the school district has to notify the student's parent in writing. So what is the current law? Currently, in terms of 3rd grade retention, 3rd graders shall not be promoted unless the student has shown a basic understanding of curriculum and ability to perform skills required in the subject of reading, but this is the key, as demonstrated by the student's grades or standardized test results. The exception to that is a student may still be promoted if they have not shown that basic understanding, if they're able to participate in an LEA-approved research-based intervention prior to the beginning of the next school year. So that's where we are right now until July 1st. Effective July 1st now, the 3rd graders shall not be promoted to the 4th grade unless the student is determined to be proficient in English language arts. Okay, that's the same. But what vehicle is used now to determine whether or not the student will be retained and that they've met expectations or exceeded expectations on the ELA portion of the student's most recent test is using the TCAP. So remember what we were using presently. Now all chips are in on the TCAP test. Now, the exception here, you remember that there's an exception existing right now under the third grade retention law, but now the exception is this. For a student who's not proficient in ELA as determined by the students achieving a performance level of approaching expectations, this is the first category, they can still be promoted, but only if, now look at all this, the student is an English language learner and has received less than 2 years of ELA instruction. So they made that score, they didn't make a good enough score on the TCAP, but, exception one, they have received English language, they're an English language learner that's received less than 2 years. Okay, so now I can go on through. I can go on through to the next grade. Or the student was previously retained in grades K through 3. Okay, so if I've been previously retained, that's the exception, can't retain me again. Or the student is retested before the beginning of the next school year and scores proficient in ELA. Or, here's another one, the student attends a learning loss bridge camp. Now, you're familiar with those because you remember that law was passed last year, and that's what Mr. Mayo was talking about when he started his comments tonight, those camps that we're having, and maintains a 90% attendance rate at the camp, and the student's performance on the post-test administered at the beginning of the learning loss bridge camp demonstrates adequate growth as determined by the Department of Education. And then here's an or, the student is assigned a tutor through Tennessee All-Core. All right? So that's one exception, but again, that's for the approaching expectations category. Now, for the kids who are below expectations, there's still an exception for those folks. They can progress on, but here are their exceptions. One, it's the same as for the previous category. They're an English language learner and has received less than 2 years, or the student was previously retained, or the student is retested, or, and this is the difference than the prior category, the student attends the learning loss bridge camp before the beginning and maintains a 90% and is assigned the TNL Core tutor. Okay, so those are the exceptions. Now,
I have a question really
sir,
quick about
yes,
that
sir,
before-
yes, sir.
Before I forget it.
Yes, sir.
We go back to that previous slide?
Yes, sir, I can.
So in both cases, like number 2 specifically, if you meet that particular number 2, does that just wash everything else out?
Yes,
Okay,
sure does.
okay.
Now, for fourth grade retentions, and again, this is for the 23-24 school year, all right? So you have to keep in mind what we just said because we have to borrow some principles from that to apply to the fourth grade retentions. A third grade student who was promoted to fourth grade based on that first exception, do you remember that? That was the one where they're approaching, all right? They have to show adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA portion of the TCAP test as determined by DOE before the student can be promoted to the fifth grade. Now, third grade student who was promoted based on that exception 2, which was the below, you'll remember, they have to show adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA portion before the student may be promoted to the fifth grade. So a student shall not be retained in the fourth grade more than once. Now, here's some deeper insight, and that is that if you have a special needs student, that student, you cannot say to a student, just because you're a special needs student, you can't progress, because that's discriminatory based on their disability. But on the other side of the coin, school districts can't retain a student based on the student's disability or suspected disability. And then what may a parent do if he or she objects to their child being retained? This is new. You remember that under the current provision, you go to Mr. Goforth, basically, if you're a parent and you're not happy with the retention decision. But now you appeal to the State Board of Education. However, that's only on the issue of retentions based on approaching expectations. The kids who are below expectations do not have that avenue of appeal to the state board. Everybody everybody can get that part? Okay, so, and then school districts don't have any discretion to grant appeals based on the ELA testing provision. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for that. Mr. Goforth is the, penultimate expert on this subject, and so he's here to answer your questions or concerns, really, if you have any questions about this. And this policy, by the way, is on your agenda for next month. Because the state board is not going to meet until July to finalize this. But as typical, we're required to have this in place by the time school starts, and the state board won't have met by the time that you will meet again. So, yes, Mr. Lamar.
What percentage of students are we talking about in the 3rd and 4th grade? 1%, 6%? That kind of gives me an idea of where we are. If it's 1/2 of 1%, we don't have much of a problem. So what percentage are we dealing with in Donaldson and Arlington Elementary?
And I think the question really is that you're asking is probably what percentage of the students in 3rd or 4th grade will fall in those two categories,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Mr. Goforth?
Well, Mr. Lamar, what I would say is, actually, I was looking through it this afternoon, so if you took the numbers, it would impact about 135 students between both schools. That is a pretty good number, I would say, of students, but, as Ms. Speakman shared, there are several avenues for these students to pathways to take. A couple of things I do want to point out, and it kind of maybe connects back to what Mr. Benjamin was asking. He asked about the K2. So something that will be very important in our jobs as educators moving forth is we've always looked at our K2 kids closely, but more important than ever, if a student is in kindergarten or 1st grade or 2nd grade and there are any type of academic challenges, we want to try to head those off early on for those students. So it's extremely important. It's, like you said, it's the 3rd grade retention law or whatever, but it's for all of us, it's really about K1 and 2 as well, because we've got to really start early with those kids to make sure they get the support that they need. Another thing to add to what Ms. Speakman talked about, an important part of this is going to be to make sure that all stakeholders are aware of what's going on. So our team has a draft that we've created of a communication plan that honestly you will probably be seeing it on every corner, because parents have to know continually, because as you know as well as I know, there are situations where students could be making A's and B's and come up on TCAP and say be below proficient or where they shouldn't be, and according to this, that student would be retained. So those are going to be some, challenges and conversations to have. So that's why from our end, we feel like that communication plan all along the way is what we have to stick to that, with all of our screeners, with our benchmark testing. So again, you're going to see a lot of it out in the community, but we have to make these parents aware of this. But again, I will say there are some avenues up there, and that last avenue that Ms. Speakman pointed to about if they go to a summer camp, what our conversations in our office are, we do feel that last avenue will support many students. So if you're, say, not where you should be on TCAP, you could attend a summer camp, but with that, you have to go to tutoring the entire next year. Now, the state has not issued any guidance on tutoring requirements, but from what we know, they look to be fairly stringent. So it will not be your optional type tutoring. It will be your, you must attend 2, 3, 4 days a week. Attendance will be taking that type of thing. So, you're not proficient or whatever, you can go to summer camp, but you're going to spend the whole next year through tutoring. But again, back to the communication plan. We know we're real. Families take vacation, things happen, so we got to communicate along the way to these stakeholders. But,
Mr. Goforth, first a statement and then a question. I think this is going to be an exercise in frustration for, for the parents and for you guys, because I've dealt with the State Department of Education over the last 5 years more than I care to. And I'm curious if they've given you any sort of details about that appeal process for the students that are close to passing, I guess is not the right word, but have they given you any sort of concept about the appeals process? Because they're not very responsive as a general rule. And secondly, what are we doing with the students while that appeal process is happening?
so to answer your question, honestly, we've been given no guidance.
Shocker.
On what that appeals process would look like. Now, in our minds, in our conversations, you know, our thinking would be that they would probably look at hardship situations, such as, you know, say a death in the family, a family member was ill, but that's just what we think. We don't know that, but we have no guidance that's been provided to us. And to answer your other question, you know, I guess I would say what would they do what would the students do in the meantime? Our camps are popular and kids want to come. So I feel like on our end, we will have the information to go ahead and, you know, get those kids into the camp no matter what. And to be honest, you don't know how the appeal process is going to go. So I would probably get in the camp.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be a way to go. So.
And we'll be able to communicate that, surely.
Absolutely. But
and I'm sorry, quick follow-up question. This organization that's supposed to provide the tutors, I'm unfamiliar with them. Is that something that you're familiar with, that organization?
Okay, the TNL Corps, I will say Arlington Community Schools is not a member of that group. The last time I looked, about half of the school districts in Tennessee are members of TNL Corps. And virtually what that is, that's a lot of partnerships with these community agencies across the state of Tennessee. I believe it was generated at first probably to target more of the metropolitan areas such as Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville. And so we don't know a whole lot, except actually your question I emailed today, and have emailed actually 3 times to ask the question, what about the school districts in Tennessee that are not a member of the TNL Corps? Well, you know, the response is always, guidance is forthcoming. So it doesn't really tell us a whole lot, but so that's what I know.
Wow.
And we made a conscious effort not to be a
Yes.
part of 10 of all core because of what we were seeing, the quality of that program. We felt like our tutoring was
my real
superior.
concern. Yeah.
And a part of the one thing I will say about the TNL Corps, and again, you know how this stuff goes, they change this weekly. But I do know the TNL Corps is really focused in on what they call high dosage tutoring, which is about 3, 4, 5 students per teacher. Now, no more than 5. So think about it, if you had, say, 60 students for tutoring, how many teachers that would take to staff something such as that. But, you know, and so again, I look for them to probably use the framework and the structure of this TNL Corps for districts that are not a member. I look for them to use the high dosage tutoring probably as something else with these districts that are not a member. But again, I actually just emailed today about that.
Well, it seems striking. If we have 135 students in a district like this, you're going to need a lot of Tennessee All-Corps people.
But that is correct. And one thing about that is, and you will, many districts across the state, and it's not always things that we necessarily agree with, but you know, it's hard to get teachers to do tutoring at times.
Yeah.
So many districts, you will notice, they have, you know, their assistants tutoring. They've going out to, you know, cafeteria staff, anybody that can tutor, volunteers in the community, that type of thing, you know. Again, I originally think it was more for those metro areas, but it kind of, you know, caught some steam and rolled on, but,
Wow.
you know, so, but,
Thanks, sir.
yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. What about if we're going to require students to be retained and to come to summer school or whatever that may look like, will we also be required to provide transportation or them to get to the classroom, anything like that?
Well, honestly, at this point, I have seen no guidance saying that that would be required. Now, I know in our past summer camps, transportation has been an option, but we have not taken them up, you know, that offering. But again, unless some earth-shattering news comes out, I don't know that it would be required. But again, you know, you just don't know from day to day.
Okay.
I think the theory is that we're not requiring them to do it because it is purely voluntary.
Oh,
And
so you could be voluntary to, I don't have to go to fourth grade.
that's the
So
theory.
I'm choosing to
That's-
have my child go through the tutoring so he or she can promote on to fourth grade. I see
Precisely.
what you're
And
saying.
if your student didn't make the grade, so to speak, then, you know, it's your responsibility to get them to the camp.
Gotcha.
Because we can't require any of those exceptions.
Right, okay.
Only, except to the extent that if you're gonna go to the next level, as you
have
just
to do them.
alluded to. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
okay,
right.
that makes sense, yeah,
And
thank
that's,
you.
and that's one thing too, to connect with Ms. Speakman is, you know, we do know that, and it's a great question, Mr. Benjamin, that, you know, a lot of these students could be bus riders.
Yeah.
You know, and that may be their only option for transportation. And parents work.
90%
Yeah,
requirement for
absolutely. So,
attendance is.
it's definitely a great question. It's something definitely to put on our maps for sure.
How many students have we had participate in the camps in the last 2 years?
We've averaged about 200 students in the camps. We usually invite probably upwards of 250 to 300, but those attendance numbers are always high at the beginning of those camps. And the further you go through the summer and you add in your vacation Bible school and your vacations and travel plans, those numbers do go down, but around 200. Yes, sir.
I noticed in both cases, you can only be retained one time. My assumption is if you can only be retained one time, then you're going to be promoted where you're worth being promoted or not. Does that seem kind of fun that you can't, why was that chosen? You only be retained one time? I mean, that would be my question, because, you know, 3 strikes, you're out. You don't get called out when you swing at the ball the first time. So I'm saying here, gosh, I just don't understand why that you couldn't be retained more than once if you had not succeeded when you've been retained one time.
Right, I would agree with that. And, you know, like I said, and honestly, currently, with the way we've always operated, it's very rare that we would ever retain a child more than one time, because we know that retention is not the best avenue. As educators, it is our job to never give up and continue to work with those kids to get them where they need to be. But, you know, I think it maybe sort of matches a little bit what many school districts already do. You know, you once, but let's up the support for that student.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of things to add on to that. Number one is that we know statistically the higher grade in which you would retain a student, the more likely they are to just drop out of school, period. So that's, you know, cost-benefit analysis of continuing on in that from that standpoint. The other one is this, and I'm so excited that you guys really are asking questions and that you're so engaged in this, because from the beginning, Mr. Mayo will tell you, and Mr. Goforth too, I mean, I've been driving them crazy since this came out, because, you know, I feel like Chicken Little, you know, a little bit, because I knew from the beginning, you know, what far-reaching implications this had, because as you know, when you go to these TSBA things, you know, again, you know, you know, they're just regurgitating the stuff, and until you put it in the context of like what we are right now, that this is your own child, this is what would happen to your own child, it's kind of hard to get your arms around. But the biggest political issue is this, is that in a large school district in which you retain a lot of you may be retaining a lot of students, think of the cost implication there. You have to plan for a huge amount of students to go 13 years to school, or 14 years to school, whatever it is. And that means 14 years worth of teachers and 14 years worth of, you know, classrooms and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big ticket assigned to this legislation.
There was a noticeable absence in the new funding formula for this particular program as well.
Well, it's interesting. It's not specifically noted as being for retention, but there is a provision in TISA for K through 3. But as you point out, though, it doesn't readily cover all of these kinds of expenses like we're talking about. It just says we're going to make a presumption that kids in K through 3 are going to need extra supports, because we know statistically in the state there are a lot of kids, you know, who are not reaching these benchmarks. And so just this random number, you know, that for K through 3, we're just going to give you $500, you know, it's a little hard to digest from a budgeting standpoint as to how this will all shake out in the end. And that's, from a TISA standpoint, that's kind of the thing that we're all worried about, is it all sounded good that we're going to get a whole bunch of money, but then, yikes, you know, will it really happen, you know?
Well, the issue too across the state is that a lot of the urban centers and the rural kids all have a lot of the same problems. That's food insecurity, transportation issues, technology issues, and so this may cost a lot more money than people really understand.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think it's important to point out too is that there was a lot of lobbying going on for some amendments to this law, but there was absolutely, you know, from superintendent groups, from school boards, but there was absolutely no appetite for any amendment in this. I mean, people worked really, really hard to try to find some other avenues to limit that number, or give local districts some opportunities to work with students in a workaround way to get them proficient, but keep them from being retained. But there was no appetite for that.
Is there a specific curriculum or methodology of teaching the reading to go with this program? Or is it just this district likes this district likes that?
Mr. Goforth is going to answer more particularly your question, but in terms of, it reminded me, I wanted to say one other thing about the TN All-Core, is that while Mr. Goforth is correct, we're not exactly sure how all this is going to shake out if you're not a member of TN All-Core. But what is implicit in the legislation, though, is that you have to follow their standard, the TN All-Core tutoring standard, at least for the tutoring part. Now I'll let Mr. Goforth speak to the bigger picture of, you know, before you get there, but that's an issue to be considered.
Ms. Conley, I will say we don't really have any guidance of required programs to use with this new law. What I will say is, if I have any say in this, and I think I will, you know, you already know we have great teachers at elementary schools, and what we do with our kids works. So I would like to keep it local of what we do with our students, because we've seen, it's sort of as Dr. Viox has referenced, in our summer camps, the state has rolled out several support programs that are not always successful with our students. So our teachers know what our kids need, and
Well, that's one of my concerns, because when I was principal in Memphis City, the programs that were just slammed at us, you're going to use this, you're going to use this, you're going to use this, and you're like, you can't even get through any of it, you know, to make it work. And finally, we just bit the bullet and decided we were going to do what we were doing because it worked. And
you know, I got my hand slapped for it, but once they saw the data and what was going on with our kids, then they kind of backed off and let us do what we needed to do to educate the students.
Okay, if there are no more questions on this one, I'm going to try to speed through the next one. This one's called the Age Appropriate Materials Act of 2022. This has been a very controversial piece of legislation. Mr. Goforth, again, has just been such a wonderful wealth of knowledge about, you know, how we can communicate with our librarians and our principals and get feedback that we needed to draft this policy, which is, by the way, as you already know, on your agenda for tonight, and it's titled Library Collections. Mm-hmm. So I want to just, again, take a quick minute to call your attention to some definitions that are in this that are counterintuitive, really. Beginning with this school year, each school shall maintain a current list of the materials in the school library collection on the school's website. Well, when I saw that, I thought, oh, you know, mind explosion here. But as it turns out, we're already doing that. So I was excited to find that out. So we already have a list of those materials. But now look at this definition. A library collection, now I bet you were thinking library book, right? But it's the materials made available to students by a school, but does not include materials made available to students as part of a course curriculum. And here's what's included: books, periodicals, newspapers, manuscripts, films, prints, documents, microfilm, discs, cassettes, videotapes, video games, applications. Folks, that's a big one, because you know what that word is in the digital world, and that touches just about on everything that we do. And subscription content in any form. So that's what this policy covers, is all this stuff. So everything other than the actual in-room curriculum. So by the 22-23 school year, we have to have a policy. Again, that's why it's in your stack for today. What do we have to cover in that policy? A procedure, which again, they call it a procedure in one place, a policy in the other place, so we're calling it a policy. A policy that requires that each school, when they choose items for their library collection, that they must ensure that it's appropriate for the age and maturity levels of the students who have access to the materials, and that is suitable for and consistent with the educational mission of the school. Now that's where our policy starts. And what we all collaborated on and agreed upon at the end was that initially we already have a library collection, right? We're not the law sort of assumes that we're just gonna start today, and from here on, you know, we're going to go through this procedure. But we have hundreds and hundreds of these books and applications and that sort of thing. So our policy presumes that that's where we start. And that going forward, that when we select other items that fit within this definition, that we first have a committee that's appointed by the principal, that includes a librarian, that includes teachers, and that includes somebody from technology who can help out with this stuff about this application selection. And then after it goes to that group, a recommendation is made to the principal about whether or not an item should be selected. So you have to visualize, you know, every year you're probably talking about, you know, for new materials, you know, could be 300-400 items on a list. And that would be given to the principal. The principal then would determine whether or not that those items could in fact be purchased, and then we go from there. That's on the new materials. I'm going to skip to C and then talk about the periodic review. And so that really comes from if members of the committee were to determine or were to learn somehow that there are, you know, certain materials in the world, so to speak, that people have found objectionable from the standpoint of being age appropriate, right, and within the mission of the school. And then the committee would then decide, you know, and then discuss whether or not something should be deselected from our library materials collection. And then the principal would have an option to weigh in there too. And then if a parent is unhappy with a decision that's been made in terms, it's a student's parent, or an employee of ACS that disagrees with an item that is in the library collection, they can then provide feedback. And that goes, again, initially to the committee, to the principal, and then could ultimately end up with you all. And so that's, I know you've read the policy, and it was just really important to me that you understand that something could end up in your court, to use your term, Mr. Lamar, as in tennis terms, in your court, to make a decision on at some point. So the duties of the Board of Education would be to evaluate each material for which feedback is provided according to the policy, to again determine whether it is appropriate for the age and maturity levels of the students who may access the materials. So think of it this way. This is something important that you all are going to have to look at. So yes, it's possible that, let's just use a book because it's simple, a library book, that this library book could be appropriate for an 8th grader, right? It's in the library collection, but not appropriate for a 2nd grader. So the method would be is to prevent access to the 2nd grader to this material. Do you see you see what I'm saying? So it's so you have to look at not just age and maturity level, it's the phrase of the student who may access the material. And then the second piece is to determine the material is suitable for and consistent with the educational mission of the school. And then if the board makes that determination, then of course the board can direct that that item be removed from the library collection. Now, here's the sticky wicket, and that is you know, there is a famous United States Supreme Court case, and it has to do with obscenity. And this law actually was passed with that notion in mind, that there are items that legislators, that people in our state believe have that characteristic, that they consider them to be obscene or pornographic. And so the way that the United States Supreme Court has defined that is you know it when you see it, right? And so the point of that is to say, when the board is going to make these decisions, these are going to be hard decisions potentially to make, because there may be some of you who believe this is age appropriate, this might be fun for my child, you know, to read this book. And then some people might say, well, I don't think it is. So I think this is going to be a little more complicated than what might appear at first blush. The other piece is that, is it consistent with the educational mission of the school? Again, that's a little amorphous, you know, to decide what that really means. So hopefully it is our goal that we deal with these issues, you know, at the school level primarily, and so that every single day you're not faced with, you know, a challenge of making these determinations. But, you know, there is that possibility. And so then if the student or the student's parents, et cetera, is not happy with the decision you make, they can appeal that to the State Textbook and Instruction Materials Commission. So I know that was really fast to go through there, but I do want to point to one specific thing. That is to say, these challenges have to be ACS employees, ACS students, or parents of ACS students. What we're seeing throughout the country when laws like this are passed is that when the General Assembly doesn't put into the law the fact that it has to be related to that particular institution, then people from New Jersey who, you know, don't like a book can come in and make these complaints. But our law is specific to, you know, these particular schools. One last thing, again, and I know I keep saying one last thing, but I'm trying to hurry so much, is that it is possible to have a book that is not appropriate for one school, but is appropriate for another school. So that's something else you're looking at. So let's say that, you know, it is your determination that at Donaldson it's fine, but AES it's not. And I know that seems peculiar and that probably it might not ever happen, but that is embedded in the law, that you're looking at these items per school. And once again, you're looking at items not based on whether somebody in Los Angeles thinks that this is inappropriate, but whether people in Arlington, Tennessee believe it's appropriate or not. Okay, any questions with that one?
So this, when I read this originally, when I got this, it reminded me of Footloose. And that's what I went to whenever I was thinking about it.
Oh, that's funny. I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
And then secondly, it also reminds me of book burning. That's what this feels like. Is that, okay, I'm going to go get it, and we're going to pick a pile outside AES, and we're going to burn them in effigy, and people are going to be standing around with their pitchforks over the books that we're going to burn that somebody has chosen to say that it's not appropriate, rather than just going, well, you shouldn't read that, Johnny.
Right. That's not for
That's
you.
just-
Yeah, I mean, Johnny or
That's just what it feels to me, you know?
No, it's true.
Well, I feel like you made the most important point last, which is great. Typically, when they do these kind of things, they don't carve out that it's for our district. I think they're getting the local control aspect here, finally, maybe.
at least on this one.
At least on this one,
Yeah.
and so hopefully more to come, but there was so many people lobbying to control public education in the state of Tennessee, at least we don't have to worry about it in this regard. So
Yeah, I think so,
that's
and
super
I mean,
helpful.
and this goes to Mr. Benjamin's comment and yours, Dr. Biux, is that, you know, during the debates on this, some of the legislators who frankly were not really comfortable with this law were asking the questions to the people who were testifying, who said that this law was so needed because porn is rampant in every school district, and so somebody finally said, well, ma'am, how many books are you aware of that you believe have pornography in them? And then the answer was, well, one, and one's too many. So, I mean, so that's kind of where we are. But anyway, thank you so much for indulging me, and thanks for taking a good look at all these policies that are before you tonight.
Thanks
Have a good
to
evening.
both of
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Speakman, Mr. Goforth. And that was a very succinct presentation compared to what all has been involved in this and how that's come down. So I appreciate them taking the time to do that. And that concludes the very long superintendent report for tonight.
Did you say it was going to be short?
My part.
Oh, okay. Oh, my. Okay, financial report. Now, Miss Amy said I could call her Miss Amy Sapp because I can't say her last new name. But I'm going to practice after this. And Amy is filling in for Miss Roberts tonight. We really appreciate this, you filling in for us.
So the lighthearted financial report after that long presentation. This is the April 2022 financial report. The general fund, we had revenues of $44,296,385. Expenditures were $34,077,011. Our nutrition fund, we had revenues of $2,539,071. Expenditures, $1,369,959. And then our federal and discretionary grants, revenues were $3,096,394. And expenditures, $3,080,363. And our CIP fund revenues of $1,270,080. Expenditures at $1,792,701. Then the interlocal health benefits planned asset trust report for April as well. Year-to-date revenues were right at $40.2 million. Expenses at $34.9 million. And the beginning net position is 12.4 with an ending at 17.7 million. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. TLN report.
Go report.
Thank you, Ms. Lamar. All right, let's get to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Lamar,
Second.
second by Ms. Conley. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion's carried. Superintendent Mayo, we are ready for you to lead us through our miscellaneous budget items and business recommended action items.
Alrighty. Making sure this computer cooperates with me tonight. The first item is item 8A, and that's Resolution 2022-13 of Arlington Community Schools Board of Education amending the 2021-22 schools budget. That's, again, something we do every month, and that's moving money around within accounts. It does not require town approval to provide for professional development opportunities or instructional materials or anything that's continued to be needed. And this budget technically ends on June the 30th, but you will see us continue to make some movement in that because it doesn't really have to be closed out until sometime later on in July. So with that, it is my recommendation that you approve Resolution 2022-13, amending the 2021-22 schools budget for Arlington Community Schools.
Motion to approve?
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Viox and a second by Mr. Benjamin. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion's carried.
Okay, the next one seems a little strange because it is a recommendation to amend the 2022-23 school year budget that hasn't started yet, because that will not start until July 1st, 2022. However, a lot of times when we're building the budget, we don't always get the exact amounts for some of our title funding. So this budget amendment is related to actual title funding, which is really a grant opportunity is how it's received in revenues. And so because of that finalization of that funds, we do have to make an amendment to this budget before we ever get started with it. So with that, it is my recommendation that you approve Resolution 2022-14 of the Arlington Community Schools Board of Education amending the 2022-2023 school year budget.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Conley and seconded by Dr. Viox. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and the motion is carried.
Okay. The next item my computer is acting really strange, but I'm reading off the agenda. I can do it off the agenda. So this resolution is 2022-15 of Arlington Community Schools Board of Education to approve the 2022-23 school fee schedule. And this is something you see every year at this time. We've gotten input from all of our principals on what those fees are going to be needed for the upcoming school year. Obviously, we make changes to those throughout the year as needed, but this is the bulk of the fees that are being required or requested at the schools for this entire school year. So with that, you'll see that outlined school by school. So with that is my recommendation that you approve Resolution 2022-15 of the Arlington Community Schools Board of Education 2022-2023 schools fee schedule.
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Conley, seconded by Mr. Benjamin. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion's carried.
Okay.
Next item.
So the next item is Resolution 2022-16 of Arlington Community Schools Board of Education to approve increasing the threshold over which public advertisements and sealed competitive bids or proposals are required. That threshold would move from currently from $25,000 up to $50,000. So that will help us with some upcoming purchases and bids to go ahead and get this approved now so that we can start our new fiscal year with this already in place. So it is my recommendation that you approve Resolution 2022-16 of the Arlington Community Schools Board of Education to approve increasing the threshold over which public advertisements and sealed competitive bids or proposals are required.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Benjamin, seconded by Ms. Conley. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Motion is carried.
Okay, the next item is approval of policy 2.805 purchasing, and the reason that this policy has to be a standalone voting item is because we are revising the policy and it could not go on the consent agenda because this resolution has to be passed before, the resolution you just passed has to be passed before you can amend this policy, which contains this new information that you just approved in the resolution. So with that is my recommendation. I can. So with that, it's my recommendation that you approve the revision or the amendment of policy 2.805 purchasing.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Dr. Viox and seconded by Mr. Benjamin. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion's carried.
Okay, the next item is 9D, approval of IDEA, ESEA federal funds allocations for 2022-23. And basically, we've been advised what those funds will be, and I think there's a copy of that attached to your document, and that we are saying that we will receive those funds and spend those in the way that those funds are intended to be spent. And we do this every year at the onset of getting those funds. So with that, it's my recommendation that you approve the IDEA, ESEA federal funds allocations for 2022-23.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Lamar, seconded by Ms. Conley. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion's carried.
Okay, the next item, 9E, is the approval of the 2022-27 strategic plan. So once this item, if this item gets on the floor, then I will ask Mr. Hill to come back up and take us through how we started the strategic plan and where we landed on the strategic plan. So with that, it's my recommendation that you approve the 2022-27 strategic plan.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Lamar, seconded by Ms. Conley. We will wait for your presentation, Mr. Hill.
Going into this, I worried that I would have the longest presentation of the night, but Ms. Speakman, I think
She
will
beat you.
keep me on track. Okay, so tonight I am excited to talk to you about the 2022-2027 strategic plan. Mr. Mayo mentioned earlier this school year, once we got this project started, that we were taking a different approach to strategic planning than we've ever done in the district. So it was an exciting process, and I hope that you'll see that and be pleased with what the committee came back with. So first, I think that it's important that we, is this gonna work, Russell? Okay, I might have used you twice. So first, I think it's important to review our current strategic plan, which was the 2018-2023 strategic plan, just to kind of give you a refresher of what we passed in and some of the things we've done. So back then, we identified 4 pillars that we wanted to focus on in that strategic plan. That was improve student achievement, maximize employee capacity, improve organizational efficiency and effectiveness, and engage community support. So some of the major initiatives that have come out of our current strategic plan, you'll see in the middle column there, incorporating EMENTs district-wide. And that was really kind of a new approach for our districts. It's basically how to implement effective instructional practices and blending learning strategies when it comes to technology in the classrooms. As you know, we are a one-to-one iPad district. For some teachers, they were very comfortable using iPads from day one. Others, not so much. So EMENTS was a great tool to bring in teachers from across the K-12 spectrum, to bring them in to show them those instructional practices and those blended learning strategies that they could bring back not only to their own classroom, but back to their schools in general and really help facilitate that learning with other teachers in the building. So that was a really good initiative that came out of this plan. The other thing was spotlight on employees. That kind of complemented something we've done since 2014, 2015, when we launched the district. the ACS Plus experience, where we highlight employees for giving a plus experience to our students and families. Spotlight and employees is something to complement that. So this is where we highlight one employee, whether it be a classified or certified employee, once a month from each school, just a way to recognize and show them out in the community to highlight the incredible things they're doing at their buildings. The other thing was the extra personal day for those at the top step. Before this strategic plan passed, if you were at the top step and the board passed a step raise, they didn't get anything, unless you also passed the cost of living and they got the cost of living, but they were already at the top step, so they didn't get anything. So what this strategic plan did was give them something, and that was an extra personal day. And that is something that will continue. Just because we're moving away from this strategic plan doesn't mean that's going away, it's going to continue as well. Superintendent Leadership Roundtable. Before the strategic plan, we did not have this, so this gives the superintendent another way to get feedback from our employees, both from classified and certified staff. That Superintendent Leadership Roundtable is also the committee that helps us with the calendars, basically. So you know that we pass calendars 2 years in advance, and so they're kind of like our sounding board for that, but they're also the sounding board for a lot of things that Mr. Mayo brings to that committee. We transitioned AMS from the Bobcats to the Tigers. You'll remember we had a middle school and a high school, a town with one middle school and one high school, yet we had the Bobcats and we had the Tigers. And so we wanted to align those athletics to make sure that we were all the Tigers. Some other key takeaway, employee benefits presentations. So even before this strategic plan passed, we did have an employee benefits specialist, that's Stephanie Moore, in-house. But what this allowed us to do was really focus in on increasing the benefits presentations that she offers in the district. Dr. Clark likes to say teachers went to school to teach. They didn't go to school to learn about what benefits exist for them and how to navigate their benefits. So this allows Stephanie Moore and our Human Resources Department to really get out there a little more, just to tell our employees about kind of what we offer. Quarterly food trucks. Who doesn't like food trucks? That came out of the strategic plan, and just a way to highlight and celebrate our employees for the work they're doing throughout the year. We aligned ACT standards into our pacing guides, so parents can go on our website at any time and see the curriculum and pacing guides that are going on in our district. And we transitioned select advanced placement coursework and other kind of higher level coursework opportunities down to lower high school grades. So before this, we realized a lot of AP courses and those kind of higher level courses were only available to juniors and seniors, but we wanted our freshmen and sophomores to go ahead and start dipping into those opportunities as well. So those are some of our major highlights from the current plan we're in. But this time we really wanted to take a new approach. We wanted to think of strategic planning a little differently. And that's because strategic planning should truly touch every employee in the district, because it's our forward-focused vision for the entire district. Yet, what we found in that 2018-2023 plan that I was just discussing were a few things. One, we learned that it wasn't really necessarily a long-term vision, which is what a strategic plan is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a 5-year vision for the district. It wasn't long-term because the past 2 strategic plans, we have finished at least a year prior. So you'll notice that old plan was called the 2018-2023, yet we're in 2022 bringing a strategic plan back to you. So with this new approach, we really wanted to make sure that it was more visionary and set more goals that would actually lead us for 5 years. That way we're not coming back to you a year or two early to pass a new one. So that was one approach. The other thing, it was very central office based, not in the sense that the committee back then was central office based. It was actually very diverse. Had about 40 people that ranged from classified and certified employees, teachers, front desk clerks, parents. So that was very diverse in that sense. But once it was passed by the board, it really kind of became a document that only lived in central office. Really only central office people knew what was in the plan. And so we really wanted to make sure that this strategic plan that I'm about to discuss is different. It was kind of it became in ways, a checklist of givens. So one just prime example that I can kind of point out to you in the current strategic plan that was just a given was changing out our light fixtures for LED lights. Now, Mr. Ruff will tell you that's the way everyone's going, and that was a given, that we were likely going to change our lights to LED, whether it was in that plan or not. So we really wanted to get away from givens and, again, be more visionary with our goals. And then finally, it wasn't necessarily transformational. It didn't become a part of our culture, and we really want a strategic plan to do that. So we broke this strategic plan process into 2 phases. The first phase being creating the portrait of an ACS graduate. And so the portrait of an ACS graduate is our vision for students and what they will need to succeed in college, career, and life by identifying 21st century skills, character traits, and social emotional competencies. So what we set out to answer to create this portrait of the graduate were a few things. We wanted to know what skills are essential for our students' futures. What are the hopes, aspirations, and dreams that our communities have for our youngest learners? What traits, skills, and mindsets do students need to be successful regardless of the area they choose to pursue? And what we mean by that, whether they choose to go to college or straight into the workforce. What do we want our students to have beyond test scores? ACS, we're proud to be among, the top in the state when it comes to test scores and achievement. We like to pride ourselves on that. And so I don't want to say that's a given, but I do want to say we're always going to be focused on test scores. We're always going to be focused on student achievement. It doesn't necessarily have to be listed in a plan because that's part of who we are in our DNA. So what beyond test scores do we want our students to have? And then also, what skills do our students currently lack when they graduate? And what can we do about it to make sure that they're not leaving us without those skills? So in order to answer those questions, we had a pretty large feedback period. We still, again, continued a diverse ACS strategic plan committee. It was made up of teachers, but also counselors across the K-12 spectrum. General education teachers, specialty teachers in the fine arts, and career and technical education. That was still diverse. We also held listening sessions with students. So we held a couple listening sessions at the high school, at the middle school, and even the elementary level. And they gave us some interesting things as well about what they felt they want out of their educational journey. But we also thought that it was important to hear from alumni. They went through, many of them that we talked to started here in Arlington and ended in Arlington. So we wanted to know from them, what was it like when you entered the workforce or college? What did you feel that we didn't prepare you for? And it was a lot of great feedback from them. We also did a district learning day session in February where all faculties got to talk about this in meetings and give us feedback about what they felt and what they would want. We also did an ACS parent survey. We also did a survey to the Chamber of Commerce, of which the board members also would have received it then. And then we also had multiple, strategic plan findings reports where they would go out, get this information, come back, report it to the committee, go back out, get follow-up information, come back and report again. So it was that kind of come and go with information. But what was really important about this, and again, you say, well, when I said earlier, one of our goals was to make sure this was not very central office based. Our goal here was really to put this power back in the hands of schools. So we really wanted them to lead these sessions with their students, with their faculties, and really take ownership so they could get that school level buy-in. So we really kind of took a hands-off approach so the schools could lead this. So throughout that feedback period, we heard from over 400 employees, 800 parents, 70 plus students, 18 alumni, 31 chamber members, and so that's over 1,300 voices. So already there, we wanted to bring more voices into this strategic plan, and we felt like we did that because we heard from over 1,300 voices, where in the past we've just had that one select committee of 40, maybe 50 people, and that's all we heard from. Well, now we got a much larger scale of people. So after all of that, shuffling through what everyone said, answering those questions, this is our portrait of the ACS graduate. These are things that people collectively said across the board, teachers, students, parents, community members. Everyone said these things. These are the trends that rose to the top about what our students need before they graduate high school, or even things they feel like some of our students are lacking. So that is ACS graduates will communicate effectively, collaborate intentionally, cultivate creativity, be resilient, and lead with empathy. And so I want to walk you through what each of these mean and kind of the thought process behind it. And I pulled a quote for each one of them. And so on Communicate Effectively, this is a quote from one of our alumni, class of 2018. This person said, "I think the biggest shock to my system going into college is that I was terrified of communicating with people I didn't know. Communication is such an essential skill that I wasn't even aware I lacked, and I wish I had been forced into those uncomfortable situations before I had graduated high school." And so what does it mean that an ACS graduate will communicate effectively? Listens to others to generate understanding, unafraid and empowered to ask questions. We heard this a lot from teachers, especially from veteran teachers. They said as the years have gone on, they've noticed that more and more students are quiet, reserved in class. They're not speaking up, they're not asking questions, and we're not really sure why that is. And we saw that situation happen, I guess moved in the wrong direction during COVID because everyone was wearing masks or we were in the hybrid situation. And so the pandemic just kind of made that worse. And so we want to make sure that they're not afraid and that they feel empowered to ask those questions in class. Knows how to engage in thoughtful communication even in the absence of technology. This was another thing that we heard, because they're always on the phone or they're always on the iPad, that's how they communicate. But you take those technology devices away and they just sit there. And they don't know how to talk to each other, or they don't know how to have that one-on-one communication, teacher to student, student to student. And so we really want to make sure that they know how to engage in that communication even when the phones are away, or even when the tablets are away. Presents information in a variety of contexts using digital and non-digital tools. Uses technology and contemporary digital tools to explore and exchange ideas that are productive and respectful, and is aware of how body language and nonverbal communication reinforces what is being conveyed. So our next one is collaborate intentionally. This came from an AMS student. This person said, most projects nowadays are done on Keynote or PowerPoint, but I would like the opportunity to work with and learn from others more, even in regular classes. And we asked the student, what do you mean by regular classes? And what they were really talking about, tested subjects, general education classrooms. They felt like those were more lecture-based. And even in those classes, they wondered how we can be a little more interactive and be a little more collaborative, even in those regular classes. And they went on to say, I think COVID has shown us that there's value in building relationships and working together to solve the world's problems. So what does collaborate intentionally mean? Seeks out diverse opinions to grow in their learning. Builds and nurtures collaborative relationships through diverse networking. We heard the word networking a lot from the alumni group. They felt when they went to college, a lot of that in college or just going right into the workforce is all about networking, all about making those connections. And a lot of our alumni said we weren't prepared for that. We kind of had to learn it on our own. And so they wondered how we could bring that in the K-12 level to kind of get them to experience that a little more. Recognizes, respects, and celebrates strengths in others and their own self. Assumes shared responsibility for collaborative work and values the individual contributions made by each team member. The next one, cultivate creativity. This quote came from an ACS elementary teacher. There's nothing like seeing a kid create something themselves instead of filling out the same old worksheet I've used for the past 10 years. So what's interesting about the ACS portrait of the graduate is even though we're talking about our students, a lot of these things are really expectations that we should have of ourselves as teachers, as employees, as the board. How can we cultivate creativity in our own profession as well, not just for students, but for ourselves? And so I thought that was an interesting quote to pull from the teacher. So cultivating creativity means designs and implements solutions to complex problems, explores multiple possibilities and challenges the status quo, expresses thoughts, ideas, and emotions in varied ways. This can look a lot different from student to student, whether they like to do design, art, writing, speaking, whatever it may be for them, and thinks about the big picture while not being confined by predetermined norms. Be resilient. This came from an AMS parent. Resilience and perseverance, whether in college or the workforce, they need to have the strength and grit to not give up when the going gets tough. We can teach them how to follow a path forward and most importantly, root for them along the way by investing in them and not just their final grade. And so be resilient, able to bounce back from difficult or disappointing experiences. exhibits a tolerance for ambiguity and the capacity to work with open-ended problems. So not always having the answer in front of them, sometimes working to find that answer. Embraces failure and humility as essential steps towards success. Focuses on goals through dedication and hard work. Demonstrates belief in self by realizing one's potential, and engages in self-improvement and advocacy. And then our final competency of the portrait is lead with empathy. And this came from one of our business owners here in Arlington. Service to others. In the workforce, this means helping a business succeed by being an asset to that business, not the typical what's in it for me. And so when it comes to leading with empathy, this is what we want out of our students. Understands and is aware of the needs, feelings, and thoughts of others. This was another thing that those veteran teachers really kind of felt students are more and more lacking, but they weren't just talking, that's what was interesting about this process. They weren't necessarily always talking about students. They were talking about themselves. So peers, colleagues, society in general, that they felt that it was becoming more empathetic. And so how can we, really drive that empathetic culture within our district as well? Confident in discussing emotions to find understanding, navigates relationships with generosity and patience, and actively participates in the community by giving back in positive ways, is civic-minded. So, just to recap what that portrait is, ACS graduates will communicate effectively, collaborate intentionally, cultivate creativity, be resilient, and lead with empathy. Y'all, that's only phase 1. We have phase 2. All right. So once we had the portrait of the graduate, the question was, okay, so these are the things that everyone said they feel like our students need, they're lacking, whatever it may be, they feel like they need it before they graduate. So how do we do it? How do we reach these competencies in this portrait? And so we sent these teams back into their schools to talk with their leadership teams and different teams. It was kind of up to the school to to decide who they went out to get feedback from, come back and give us those strategies to attain the portrait of the graduate. So I want to go through what the strategies we've landed on at the district level that can then be modeled and trickled down to the schools. So the first one is just kind of setting the tone for the strategic plan. Align the portrait of the graduate competencies to every course pre-K through 12 through tailored professional development and lesson planning. So what does this mean? This is basically saying we have made a district-wide commitment to keep these portrait of the graduate competencies at the forefront of everything we do. So when district office departments are planning things, administrative teams, classroom teachers, PLCs, other ACS teams, how are we finding ways to promote and highlight these competencies? The competencies that we as a school community all said were important for our students to have. So going down the list, identify and develop a K-12 college and career platform that helps learners discover interests, strengths, and post-ACS goals to create a long-term roadmap from the moment they enter the district. That term roadmap is something we heard throughout the process from really every level, teachers, students, and parents. Really just creating a roadmap about what does it mean to go from elementary to middle school? What is that transition going to look like for my child? What is that transition going to look like from middle and high? But then also, what about when my kid leaves Arlington High School? What opportunities are out there for them? So as a district, we have already begun researching and looking at various platforms that track these things. And so the overall goal of this platform is to purchase the platform, embedded in our schools. It's going to look obviously different at the elementary, middle, and high school level, but eventually it will track career interest. It will track college programs that match those interests. So if you're interested in, say, cybersecurity, here are all the colleges nationwide that are known for cybersecurity. So it connects them to those various pieces. It kind of creates that roadmap. Nationwide scholarship opportunities, alumni directory information, so it keeps up with our students as they leave by allowing us to get their personal email address, phone number. That way we can keep up with them and learn how they're doing, and more. And it will also obviously give parents a roadmap as well.
Hey, Tyler, quick question about that.
Yeah.
If we're identifying, say, if we'll go with cybersecurity, will that also align their pathway through high school with specific courses and things like that, or just to know this is where I'm going?
Well, so since we're tracking them from the moment they enter the district, so say they're here as a kindergartner and we're tracking those interests as they're going, we will have data on them telling us their interests. Because a lot of times, we have 2 counselors at the middle school. That's a lot of 8th graders to say, okay, here are what all the courses that are available at the high school. And we do a good job about telling them, what opportunities are available to them at the high school. But if we can know it more in advance by saying, okay, as a 6th grader, you're already interested in cybersecurity, I think we'll be in a better position to tell them, well, here are your opportunities at the high school. Yeah. So it does help us in ways, and it will allow us to hopefully track that a little better.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome. The next one is define and implement student-centered approaches to teaching and learning by emphasizing K-12 project-based learning and blended learning strategies to ensure students are actively engaged in and taking ownership of real-world learning. So throughout this process, we heard from students, alumni, and teachers that they wanted more of an emphasis on PBL, project-based learning, really kind of getting those hands-on opportunities in the classroom to engage them in that learning. And again, we heard that at every level. And so this is our commitment to find ways to allow our students to do more project-based learning in class. In many classrooms, though, this is going to be a mind shift. It's going to be a philosophical mind shift, because that might mean that you're going more from a lecture-based class to more of a facilitator class, where you're obviously teaching them, but students are learning from each other. They're learning the material in a different way, and it's getting them more involved. Kind of that kind of STEM approach in all classes, right? Continue rigorous and inclusive professional development content by seeking administrator, educator, and staff input. And basically here we're saying, in order to keep this portrait at the forefront, we're really going to need to tailor our professional development to make sure that we're hitting these competencies, that they're hitting on one of the 5. And obviously our continued commitment to asking our staff's input about what they would want out of professional development. Define and build essential student life skills in a pre-K-8 progression. So this could mean organization and planning, initiating tasks, time management, emotion management, effective oral, written, and nonverbal communication skills. So one of the questions we asked a lot, well, what do you think our students currently lack? And we kept hearing life skills, life skills, life skills. But then we started asking that question, well, what does that mean, life skills? That's a very vague term, and it means different things at different levels. And so we really wanted to break that out by what we meant. So at K-8, it means different things than it might be at the high school level. And so it's really challenging our elementary and our middle schools to see about embedding some of these life skills that we heard throughout the process, which was organization and planning, initiating tasks, time management, emotion management, and communication skills. How can they find ways to incorporate that in a more natural kind of sense in the classroom? And so when we're looking at 9 through 12, that obviously looks a lot different. Money management, organization and planning still, networking, stress management, professional communication. So going beyond just those kind of standard communication skills to be in a more professional manner since they're about to move on to college or the workforce, and then building those healthy physical and mental habits. So we kept hearing over and over and over and over again, kids need to learn how to do taxes. That's important. It is, but we also think there are other money management skills, and so we really wanted to define what are those life skills at the high school. Some people said changing a tire. So it's really identifying what those life skills are, and we're challenging the high school to somehow embed some of these life skills throughout the course of their high school career. Implement and encourage school and district-wide service learning projects that positively impact the community at large and promote empathetic citizenry. So we know that the more involved you are, it's going to help you when it comes to college admissions. The more you can show that you're a well-rounded student beyond academics, that is important. But we also heard a lot from our stakeholders throughout this process that they also value our students giving back to the community. So this is our district commitment and encouragement of our schools and really district-wide to show how can we get our students more involved and plugged into the community to give back. And that's obviously going to hit on the competencies of resiliency and then also being an empathetic citizen. District commitment to additional mental health resources through staffing, educator and staff training, social emotional supports, and the promotion of regular and intentional wellness solutions for students, teachers, and staff. So it's really amazing what research now shows as we go on about the childhood social, emotional, and mental effects, I guess, that are out there. We're seeing more anxiety, more depression, more ADHD. Research shows 1 in 5 children now struggle with some type of mental health illness. And so here locally, we've even seen that because of the pandemic. We saw students come back with behavior issues that they didn't necessarily have. We're just seeing more of it, right? And we think the pandemic exacerbated that problem. So in line with Tennessee's Whole Child Initiative, again, this is our commitment to looking at ways to support students, not just through academics, but also that cognitive, physical, and social and emotional development as well. But obviously, in order to have a healthy student body, you have to have a healthy staff. You have to have healthy teachers. And so it's also our commitment to look at different wellness solutions to make sure they're getting what they need so they can then pass that on to students. Host annual school-level student listening sessions to ensure student voice is being considered, heard, and incorporated where appropriate. So I mentioned earlier that we held student listening sessions at all levels, and honestly, our people, our committee, they loved it because it was interesting hearing what students love about school, but honestly, that unadulterated, honest feedback about what they hated about school and what they felt that we could do better. So although they were positively critical about what we could do better to help educate them, they were also brutally honest about themselves and their peers about what they felt they were lacking and that what they could do better. And so we really think that it's important to not just hear from them once every 5 years when we do a strategic plan, really be more intentional about listening to our students at least one time a year through this very strategic style listening session. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times when you get feedback, it's just natural to kind of go to those high flyers, those advanced placement students, those in dual enrollment. That's just a very natural thing. But we really want to hear from students who maybe don't do so well with academics. We want to hear from the students who are more involved extracurricularly. So really take a more strategic approach to who we're involving in this listening session to make sure we get a well-rounded picture of how they feel and how they're being heard in our schools. Nurture and ensure a responsive and inclusive culture for all learners to thrive through biannual student and social emotional surveys. Identify and address areas of stress to maintain and improve a positive climate and culture. So this kind of follows up that school listening session, but this one is more of a school-wide approach to kind of getting that survey data in to just fill out the culture and climate of the school to see how we can better address those needs. Support the interest and involvement of students by identifying clubs and organizations that actively engage students in real-world learning. So we asked teachers, staff members, students, everyone really, what they loved about ACS, and academics and kind of our offerings were obviously at the top. But a lot of them also mentioned the clubs and organizations and ways we get students involved beyond just academics. And throughout this process, we also kind of saw some inconsistencies about some schools offering clubs, some schools not. And so we want to make sure that all of our students have access to these clubs and organizations and that they're more consistent across the board. Obviously, the high school having the 2,100 student body they do, they're going to have more opportunities. But percentage-wise, we want to make sure that we're being a little more even and making sure that we're asking students, how can we better engage you outside of those academics? Because we know if they're engaged, that's going to help their love for school. And so we want to make sure to do that. Develop and implement strategies to improve and expand parent education programs in areas such as academics, social emotional learning, and child mental health, preparing for your child's next steps. So this strategic plan will run from 2022 to 2027. There are some challenges that we don't know yet exist before us, but there are also new opportunities to really get parents more engaged in learning about how we can better help their children succeed. You know, we're full of experts in this district. We're really blessed with teachers and educators, social and transition specialists, nurses, and so we can kind of offer our expertise through our already established ACS Pep Talks program and being a little more intentional about helping parents in those areas. And then finally, empower school administrative and leadership teams to incorporate building-specific solutions to model and attain the portrait of an ACS graduate competencies. So what this is saying here is we don't pretend that this strategic plan has all the answers. I think that's why strategic planning sometimes goes the way it does, right? Because at the very beginning of those 5 years, you set all the goals and initiatives, and then it's written in stone, but it doesn't change throughout the 5 years. And so we don't pretend that we have all the answers. We're really kind of putting it back in the school's hands. You know the 5 competencies that we all set as a community. If you feel that you can reach those competencies, but it's not necessarily listed in this plan, you're empowered to go out and do those things to reach those competencies. And so we just want to make sure that we're encouraging them and empowering them to kind of have that mindset that just because it's not in this plan doesn't mean you can't do it. You can still reach for those competencies. And so just some final thoughts before I turn it back over to Mr. Mayo. This strategic plan, notably, it does not include timelines and dates of completions and specified action steps, but instead I feel that it gives us a visionary set of goals through those strategic plan goals that I just mentioned. It kind of gives us a North Star with that portrait of the graduate, our North Star, what we want our students to attain, and then it's a living document too. So it can change from year to year throughout these 5 years to make sure that we are adequately addressing the needs of our students throughout it, and it's not going to tie us back to something that we did and said in year 1. We can change as those needs change. So I think I beat Ms. Speakman. I don't know. I didn't? She says no. Okay. I tried. So any questions?
Just a comment. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Knowing the strategic plans that I used to have and that we had before, and this, I'm just thrilled to death to be a part of this district. I really am. And I can't wait to see how this grows our district.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
One thing I thought you said, you took the strategic plan out of this building. Nobody knew anything about it except people in this building. And now it's out to the troops, and that makes it more a team effort by moving it from this building to the rest of the.
That's the goal. That's what we hope. Yes, sir.
So I'll say it's obvious the amount of time and hours that went into this.
Wow.
I'm sure it was a lot, but somebody will ask along the way, and you already have an answer to this, but what is going to be our metric for what? I mean, I know we're gonna try and keep up with them after they left, and that looks really cool. But I'm just curious, and I know you have an answer. That's the only reason I asked.
And that's something when Mr. Mayo and I kind of sat down back first semester of this past school year, like how do you measure something like this? Because it is very visionary, it's very goal setting, but it's not as measurable as saying, yep, we changed those LED lights, done. And so I think the way to do this is constantly keep it on the map. So one thing that we did with the last strategic plan is that once it was passed, it was here at central office, and we went through every year and said, okay, what have we done? Have we hit those marks? We came back to you at the end of every year and said, here are the things we did. But we never went back to that committee. We never said, how is this being implemented at the school level? And so something we're going to do different with this one is we're going to bring the committee back at least twice a year to say, what are you doing now? What will be accomplished by semester 2? And then so forth. And so that way we're actually able to measure, okay, so when we say one of the strategic plans is we want to focus more on life skills at the high school. Okay, high school, the expectation was by second semester you said that you were going to start hitting these things. So what are you doing to embed those life skills in school? So it's more of it's really kind of checking in on them. Checking in on the schools, but also ourselves, like how are we helping support the schools reach these things? So I think that's one obviously way to measure it. Now, how do we measure, hey, are kids communicating effectively? I hope that we'll see that over time. But really, that's our goal. That's what we set our student. That's what we want of our students. So hopefully we'll.
And you'll
we'll
have
actually see
student
that.
listening sessions like you did.
That's
Just
right.
As far as the check-in process, you're gonna check in with all the groups that help you
That's right.
establish these. Yeah, that's gonna
Listening
be
sessions
really
will be
cool.
one data point. The biannual kind of social, emotional, climate, and survey data, we'll be able to get some measurable results from that. We'll be able to get some measurable results from that, from the program that we'll be investing in, that roadmap program. So we'll be able to get some measurable results from that. Some of this other stuff is more checking in, like how are we doing it, and how are we making sure that it's successful.
Well, I love what you said about the guarantees and the givens, and that the givens are going to will continue to be in the top 10 in the state in ACT scores. We're going to continue to push the curriculum. We're going to continue to do this. But this is such a different thing that really, if you took this away and there was no metric, there was no measure, by all things that are public school, we're still super successful in all of the data sets that we have. So this is just kind of interesting that it's a shift into making them better humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really kind of cool. So,
I love this.
so that I mean
Yeah.
that's
I
it's
think
pretty
it's one of the
impressive.
best things I've ever seen.
Because we'll continue to do the givens, we'll
That's
continue
right.
to do all those things. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. So
Strong work,
we'll do
sir.
it. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's like it's a living, breathing document, but it's come to life, you know. And I had the pleasure of hearing some of the kids, and I mean, it fascinated. They were first hesitant about, you know, expressing themselves, but they soon loosened up and, you know, just really gave out, and it's such great information. And I loved when I heard that communication has to be improved. I think that's something that our superintendent here has been a great example of, and Mr. Hill being our communications director. I think that's just fantastic. I'm just really pleased with this. It's just terrific.
Ms. Williams, can I add something to that?
You bet.
Last year, when Mr. Hill was promoted last year to director
Yes,
of
he was.
communications / planning, and I told him, I said, your first responsibility on planning will be to lead this new, you know, strategic plan, and he's assisting with some our CIP planning as well. But I just want to say, this is like 5 years worth of work that's been done in less than a school year. And it's phenomenal work, and I've sat in on some of the sessions, the student sessions, and I think that's the thing that we forget about kids sometimes, is that giving them the opportunity to you know, they're really cool human beings when you give them that opportunity to sit down and talk with you, because in the end they were much harder on themselves probably than any of the teachers that were on the committees could be, because they recognize things within themselves. And I think that's part of what we're aiming for here is that overall approach to what is it that we want our students to look like when they leave us, and knowing what that is. And the kids helped us to get there.
And just think how the kids grew being on these committees and being a part of a group that really wanted their input, wanted to hear what they had to say. And
One student said, we got done with it, she said, we need to be better. That's what she said. So they were really, like Mr. May said, they were really kind of hard on themselves, but I think it was a good process for them to go through, and it was kind of enlightening for them, and it was cool seeing that they thought that it was a cool process. So.
yeah,
Great work.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Fantastic.
wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
I'd love to make a motion to approve this thing. If we're
Hey,
there
all
at that
right.
point. That would be good.
We have a motion by Dr. Diaz. Do we need a second? Okay, I believe Mr. Benjamin beat you.
That's all right.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Okay, the next item is 9F, and that's the approval of TK Elevator Corporation for the new installment proposal in the amount of $177,000 to furnish and install one TKE passenger elevator, and grant the superintendent the authority to negotiate the terms of the related contract. Now, if you'll recall, we tried to get that in our ESSER funds, but they would not approve it, even though they approved some flooring up there for us. But we were trying to figure out how we're supposed to get up there, but they wouldn't approve that. But anyway, This has been part of our central office plan since the inception of the development and the building of central office. So we're glad to finally get this to where, because we do store a lot of documents up those flights of stairs, financial documents, student records. So we do, our access to that is increasing, so it's a good time to do this. So with that, it's my recommendation that you grant approval of TK Elevator Corporation new installation proposal in the amount of $177,000 to furnish and install TKE passenger elevator, and grant superintendent the authority to negotiate the terms of the related contract.
All right. All right, it's been moved by Ms. Conley, seconded by, can I say you seconded by Mr. Lamar? Excuse me. It's seconded by Mr. Lamar. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, the motion is carried. All right. We are now ready for election of officers, so we will move to that.
Madam Chair, if I can make a motion, I've been sitting here thinking about this since Mr. Benjamin said, I think I've got it sort of figured out. If we could pursue it, and you'll please help me with this, Ms. Speakman, if I don't do it right, but pursuant to ACS Board Policy 1.600, I move to suspend the provision of ACS Board Policy 1.200, which requires that the board will elect its officers at the first regular meeting in June. For that, I'd rather substitute October for June and suspend that rule for a little bit, because I do feel like with 3 board positions open, I think it could vastly change the landscape. So I'm gonna did I do that? Was that okay?
Yes, sir, you need a second.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Viox and a second by Mr. Benjamin. Any discussion?
What about the October? Why is it October?
Well, I figured I just kind of arbitrarily pulled that out, but I thought the election's in August. It'll be September before they ratify it. If there's any question, I just added a month in there for padding. So I guess the way it would work is the 3 officers would just extend their term. Ms. Williams would chair, Ms. Conley would vice chair, and you'd say TLN rep for that time. It's not like we'd be without officers. We would just sort of extend your term until whoever, if there is a change in the board, could vote at that point.
Any other questions or discussion?
Well, the new year for the board will be the September meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the new.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, whoever's on
September.
here, and it'll be
September 1.
September. I was thinking September will be better than October.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I just padded a month there for, they tried to tell me for the last 3 months I lived in Fayette County, so I don't know, anything can happen.
Hey, yeah.
I can be okay with September too.
Yeah, I don't care.
I think September's more appropriate than
Okay.
October.
I'm totally fine with that September.
The only question I would have is, and if y'all would help me with this, we've done this in the past. Not that the past is always good. I mean, I'm not saying it's, but it's never affected anything in the past. Just curious why suddenly this year we want to do this.
Well, for my answer, in the past,
Sure.
most of us were unopposed, and so we kind of knew the makeup of the board going forward. That's my only reason for it, and it's entirely possible that I'll be off this board. And I'm just saying, whoever ends up on here ought to have a say-so for the following year. I think it's just an easy kind of semantics thing to take care of personally.
I would agree. Back when I was chair and we were changing superintendents, our previous superintendent wanted to actually hire the next middle school principal, but I argued against her to go, you're not even going to be here when the person you're wanting to hire comes in and, they won't serve under you. And so we should allow the next superintendent to make that hire at the time. And I think to me, the reason I even asked that question in the first place was that same kind of thing. I'll be here because I'm running unopposed, but both those guys, they have opponents, and so they could both be here, or none of them could be here, or one and one could be here. So to me, it doesn't make sense for a new board to sit under somebody else. You know, for us to make the decision for it, we could have at least 2 new people on the board.
The only other question I would have, I know, Ms. Conley, you had opposition, right? Mr. Lamar, you've had opposition. So, but it's up to the board. Any other questions or discussion before we vote?
So just to be clear, so everybody understands, if I stated the motion correctly, this is to delay. So, and I made the motion as a positive to delay. So the yes vote, just so everybody understands, would be to delay selection of chairman, vice chairman, and TLN rep. Did I say that properly?
Yes, sir, that's correct, but I just would say from this board's record-keeping purpose, if it is in fact your intention to change the month from October to September, as has been suggested, you would need to do that in a form of a substitute motion.
Sure.
But it sounds like it may be a friendly amendment, I don't know, but she's not able to type that into the minutes otherwise.
So we need a motion.
Is that a friendly amendment, Mr. Lamar?
Second.
The September month, the month of September.
I think it's more appropriate in October.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'm perfectly fine with whatever.
So we need to vote on the amendment,
So,
or make an amendment, or a motion for an amendment, and then vote on the amendment. before
I
we
think if
make the
Mr.,
motion.
if Dr. Biax accepts that,
Yes, I
then
accept.
you could
friendly amendment,
just
yes.
go with
100%, I accept it, yeah,
All right, it's been
Substitute
changed
the word
to,
September.
from October to September.
correct.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So restate the motion.
So pursuant to Board Policy 1.600, I vote to amend Policy 1.200 and change the language to selection of officers to September. Which in my mind would cover you guys all staying on as officers. Nothing changes until the vote.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Okay, I'm not sure what that vote was. Ms. Gore, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Benjamin?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Dr. Bill?
Yes.
All right, the ayes have it, and the motion is carried. Let's move on to adjournment.
Any discussion on that?
Motion to adjourn.
We've already discussed
Second.
all that. All right, it's been moved, and do we have a move? We have a motion by Mr. Benjamin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lamar, that the meeting is adjourned. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the meeting is adjourned.